A luxury hotel owner evicted a cleaner. Her silence spoke at the trial. The marble floor was so clean that it reflected the ceiling lights like still water, yet her shoes left faint marks that vanished the moment she lifted her feet. Every morning before the city fully woke, Elena Cruz pushed her cleaning cart across the grand lobby of the Aurora Crown Hotel. The air smelled of polished wood and expensive perfume, a scent that never followed her home. She moved quietly as if the building itself might be disturbed by her presence. Elena was small with dark hair, pulled into a tight bun that never loosened even after long hours. Her uniform was always neat, the blue fabric faded from too many washes. She kept her eyes lowered not out of shame but habit. In a place where people spoke loudly about money and power, she had learned that silence made her invisible. The Aurora Crown stood at the heart of the city, tall and proud, its glass walls catching the morning sun. Limousines arrived before dawn. Guests walked through the lobby with phones pressed to their ears, their voices sharp and confident. Some nodded at Elena without seeing her. Others stepped around her cart as if it were part of the floor. She wiped the same counter twice, not because it was dirty, but because it gave her a moment to breathe. Elena had worked here for 7 years. 7 years of early mornings and late nights. 7 years of watching celebrations she would never attend. Weddings, business deals, birthday dinners, with candles that cost more than her weekly pay. She knew the rhythm of the hotel better than most managers. She knew which doors squeaked, which elevators stalled, which guests liked extra towels without asking. No one had ever asked her name. In the staff locker room, her name was written on a small sticker above her space. E. Cruz. Some letters were peeling. She fixed them once with tape, then stopped caring. Names did not matter much here. Roles did. Every day followed the same pattern. Clock in, clean the lobby, move to the conference halls, then the executive floor where the carpets were thick and the walls were silent. On that floor, Elena walked slower. The silence there felt heavy like a warning. She never took anything that wasn't hers. Not a forgotten pen, not leftover food. She once returned a gold watch she found under a sofa. The guest did not thank her. He asked if anything else was missing. Elena answered no and went back to work. She lived in a small apartment on the edge of the city. The walls were thin. The bus ride was long. At night, she soaked her hands in warm water to ease the ache. She spoke to no one about her pain. Words felt expensive, and she saved them. That morning, as she polished the glass doors, she noticed a group of men in dark suits near the front desk. Their laughter cut through the lobby. One of them pointed toward the staircase Elena had just cleaned, his voice loud. "This place needs to look perfect today," he said. "No mistakes." The front desk manager nodded quickly. "Of course, sir." Elena felt a familiar tightness in her chest. Days like this meant trouble. Important guests, important expectations. Mistakes were not forgiven when power was watching. She pushed her cart toward the service hallway, her hands steady. Inside, the walls were playing the lights dimmer. This was the hotel's other face. She paused for a moment and looked at her reflection in a metal door. Her eyes were tired but clear. She straightened her shoulders. In the break room, a younger cleaner whispered, "They're watching everything today." Elena nodded. She did not ask why. She rarely asked questions. Questions could be dangerous. Back in the lobby, the doors opened again. This time a man entered alone. Tall, well-dressed with silver at his temples and a calm smile that did not reach his eyes. Conversation softened as he walked through. Staff stood straighter. Managers adjusted their ties. That was Victor Hale, the owner of the Aurora Crown. Elena had seen him before, always from a distance. He rarely looked at the floor. When he did, it was to inspect, not to see. He spoke with confidence, like someone used to being believed. As he passed, his gaze flicked toward Elena's cart. Just for a second, his smile faded. Elena felt it then. A shift, a quiet change in the air like the moment before a storm. She lowered her head and continued wiping the counter, her movements slow and careful. Was silence protection or was it a risk? How much could one quiet person endure before being noticed? Victor stopped near the front desk. He said something in a low voice. The manager's face tightened. The manager glanced toward Elena. Elena did not look up. The manager took a breath and began walking in her direction. The marble floor reflected everything, even the tension that had just begun to form. The manager stopped beside Elena's cart, but he did not greet her. His name tag read Martin, polished like the hotel's mirrors. He leaned slightly toward her, lowering his voice, yet the stiffness in his face made his words feel loud. Elena, he said as if testing the sound. After you finish here, go to suite 1803. There was a complaint. Elena kept wiping the counter. Yes, sir. Martin watched her hands for a second, like he expected them to shake. When they didn't, he added, and be careful today. Mr. Hale is in the building. Elena nodded once. That was all. Martin walked away quickly as if he had delivered a message that might burn him. Elena pushed her cart toward the service elevator. The wheels squeaked softly and she tried to guide it over the smooth floor without making noise. She had learned to move like that, quiet, controlled, never drawing attention. The service elevator smelled of bleach and laundry. A bellhop stepped in behind her earbuds and eyes on his phone. He didn't look up. Elena pressed the button for the 18th floor and stood still, hands folded. As the elevator rose, Elena's mind ran through the day ahead, like a list she could not tear up. Suite 1803, the hallway carpets, the guest bathrooms, the laundry drop-off. Then the evening shift would start, and the hotel would glow even brighter as if it did not know the people who made it shine. When the doors opened, the executive floor was silent. The carpet was thick enough to swallow footsteps. The air was cooler conditioned to perfection. Elena guided her cart down the hallway, passing doors with gold numbers. Each door hid a world of wealth and privacy. At suite 1803, she knocked twice. No answer. She knocked again, slightly louder. A moment later, the door opened halfway. A woman in a silk robe stared at Elena with an annoyed expression, her hair wrapped in a towel. What took you so long? The woman snapped. Elena blinked once. I came as soon as I was told, ma'am. The woman opened the door wider. The suite smelled like expensive lotion and champagne. A designer handbag sat on the couch. Clothes were scattered across the floor like someone had tossed them without thinking. The bathroom is a mess, the woman said, pointing, and someone touched my makeup. I know it. Elena looked at the bathroom doorway. I will clean it now. The woman's eyes narrowed. You people always say that. Just don't steal anything. Elena's face stayed calm. Her throat tightened, but she did not respond. She had learned that defending herself made things worse. Silence kept the day moving. Silence kept her job. She pushed her cart into the suite and began working. She wore gloves and moved carefully. She replaced towels, wiped the sink, scrubbed the tub. She did not look at the woman's makeup. She did not touch anything that wasn't necessary. While she cleaned, she remembered other complaints. A guest once accused her of breaking a perfume bottle that had been empty. Another time, a man yelled because the room service tray was removed too early. The hotel always leaned toward the guest version. Guests were revenue. Cleaners were replaceable. Elena finished the bathroom and stepped back. It is clean now, ma'am. The woman walked in, checked the counter, then the trash bin. Her eyes searched like she was looking for proof. It better stay that way, she said. You can go. Elena left without a word. In the hallway, she removed her gloves and placed them in her cart. Her hands were slightly damp with sweat. She kept moving. Her workday continued like that, one task after another, one quiet correction after another. She cleaned the meeting rooms where people discussed money she could not imagine. She wiped fingerprints from glass walls while voices behind them talked about expansion targets and public image. She emptied trash bins filled with half-eaten pastries and glossy pamphlets. At lunchtime, she sat in the staff cafeteria with a small container of rice and eggs. She ate slowly. Around her, other workers talked, laughed, complained. Elena listened more than she spoke. A young cleaner named Rosa sat beside her. Rosa was new with bright eyes that had not yet learned to look down. "Why do you never talk back?" Rosa whispered as if the walls might hear. Elena chewed, swallowed, then answered softly. "Because I need the job." Rosa frowned. "But it's not fair." Elena gave a small, tired smile. "Fair doesn't pay rent." Rosa looked like she wanted to say more, but she didn't. Even Rosa knew the truth in that. After lunch, Elena checked her phone. One missed call from her son's school. Her chest tightened. She stared at the screen for a second too long, then stood up and stepped into the hallway outside the cafeteria. She called back immediately. "Mrs. Cruz," a tired voice answered. "This is the school office. Mateo didn't come to class this morning." Elena's mouth went dry. "What do you mean he left home? We tried calling earlier. We couldn't reach you." Elena pressed her hand against the wall, steadying herself. "I'm at work. I will come after my shift. Please, please check again." "We will," the voice said. "But if you can come sooner." Elena's eyes stung. She forced her voice to stay even. "I will come as soon as I can." She ended the call and stood still for a moment, breathing through her fear. Mateo was 14, quiet like her, but not by choice. He had been quiet since his father left 3 years ago, leaving behind only unpaid bills and a short message: "I can't do this anymore." Elena had not cried in front of Mateo. She had kept her face steady, her voice calm. She had worked more shifts. She had cleaned more rooms. She had learned how to stretch groceries and hide worry behind routine. Now she imagined Mateo alone somewhere, and her heart felt too heavy for her chest. She returned to work because she had no other option. Leaving early meant a warning. Too many warnings meant termination. Termination meant no rent. No rent meant no home. And without a home, where would Mateo go? So she cleaned. She cleaned the lobby again in the afternoon. She cleaned the elevators. She wiped the brass handrails until they shone. The hotel looked perfect, and that perfection felt like a kind of cruelty. Late in the day, Martin approached her again. This time he looked tense. "Elena," he said sharply, "come with me." Elena's hands paused on the cloth. She followed him through the service hallway into a small office near the staff entrance. The room was plain, with a desk, 2 chairs, and a camera in the corner. Victor Hale stood inside. Elena felt the air change again. It was colder, even though the room wasn't air-conditioned. Victor's suit was dark and flawless. He held a tablet in one hand. His eyes were calm, but they looked through her, not at her. Martin closed the door behind them. Victor did not sit. "Elena Cruz," he said, reading her name like it was a line in a report. "Do you know why you're here?" Elena's voice was steady. "No, sir." Victor lifted the tablet slightly. "A guest has reported a missing item, a diamond bracelet." Elena's stomach dropped, but her face did not change. She forced her hands to stay still at her sides. Victor watched her as if waiting for panic. "You were assigned to Suite 1803 today." Elena swallowed. "Yes, sir. I cleaned the bathroom and replaced towels." Martin spoke quickly, trying to sound official. "The guest says the bracelet was on the counter. After you left, it was gone." Elena looked at Victor, then at Martin. Her voice came out soft. "I didn't take anything." Victor's expression stayed flat. "That's what people say." Elena's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him about the watch she returned, about how she avoided even looking at expensive items, about how she couldn't afford to lose her job because her son might be missing. But she didn't. She knew how it worked. Explaining sounded like begging. Begging sounded like guilt. Victor stepped closer. "We will review the hallway cameras," he said. "But understand this, Ms. Cruz. If this becomes a scandal, it will damage the hotel. And I will not allow that." Elena felt her heart pounding, but her voice stayed quiet. "I understand." Victor's eyes narrowed slightly, as if her calm bothered him. "Do you?" Elena nodded once. Martin cleared his throat. We need you to open your bag. Elena's hand moved slowly to her worn shoulder bag. She opened it without protest. Inside were her lunch container, her phone charger, a small notebook, and a folded letter from the school about unpaid fees. Martin searched quickly. Nothing. Victor looked annoyed, not relieved. Check her locker, Martin said. Elena's mouth opened slightly, then closed. She followed them to the locker room. People stared as she walked in between them. A few cleaners froze mid-conversation. Rosa's eyes widened, her hand covering her mouth. Elena felt heat rise in her face, not from guilt, but from humiliation. She kept her head high. She opened her locker. Inside were extra gloves, a cheap sweater, a small photo of Mateo, and a plastic bag with 2 apples. Martin searched anyway. Nothing. Victor's jaw tightened. Elena stood there surrounded by staring co-workers with her life exposed in a small metal box. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, to say, "Please, I'm not like that." But she stayed silent, because she knew the moment she raised her voice, they would call her emotional, difficult, unstable, and then the story would change. Victor turned away. "This isn't over," he said coldly. Martin looked at Elena. His voice softened, but only slightly. "Go back to work, for now." Elena nodded. She closed her locker carefully. She picked up her card and returned to the hallway, her hands steady, her face calm. But inside, fear was spreading like a dark stain. At the end of her shift, Elena rushed to the bus stop and rode to Mateo's school. The secretary met her at the door. "He came in late," the woman said. "He's in class now. He said he missed the bus." Elena's knees almost gave out from relief. She pressed her hand to her chest. When Mateo finally came out, he looked tired and embarrassed. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said. Elena wanted to ask where he had been. She wanted to hold him and cry. Instead, she simply touched his shoulder. "Come home," she said softly. That night, as Mateo slept, Elena sat at the kitchen table and stared at the ceiling. The hotel's accusation replayed in her mind. Victor Hale's cold voice, the camera in the office, the eyes of her co-workers. She knew what was coming next. In a place like the Aurora Crown, a missing bracelet was not just a problem, it was a weapon, and she was the easiest target. Elena folded her hands together on the table. Her lips did not move, but her mind made a quiet promise. If they wanted a fight, she would not give them noise. She would give them something else. And the next morning, when she walked back into the hotel, Martin was already waiting with a sealed envelope in his hand. Victor Hale stood alone in his office on the top floor of the Aurora Crown, looking out over the city like it belonged to him. From this height, the streets looked orderly, small, manageable. Cars moved like pieces on a board. People were dots, easy to ignore. He liked it that way. His office was wide and quiet, designed to impress without trying too hard. Dark wood walls, a large desk that never showed clutter. Framed awards lined one side of the room. Business Leader of the Year, Hospitality, Visionary Philanthropy Recognition. The glass case near the window held photos of ribbon cuttings and charity dinners. Victor always stood in the center of those photos, smiling with his hand on someone's shoulder. The smile was practiced, controlled. Victor adjusted his cufflinks and checked his reflection in the window. He looked calm. He always did. That calm was his greatest strength, or at least that's what people believed. He had built the Aurora Crown from a single property into a luxury brand known across the country. Investors trusted him. Politicians praised him. Magazines wrote about his discipline and vision. He appeared on panels and spoke about leadership, about values, about creating opportunity. He never mentioned the people who cleaned his floors. Victor walked back to his desk and picked up the tablet again. The report was still open. Missing item, diamond bracelet, guest complaint, potential liability. He frowned, not because he doubted the guest, and not because he was certain the cleaner was guilty. He frowned because the timing was terrible. There was a major investor dinner scheduled that weekend. Journalists would be present. Any rumor, any whisper about theft inside the hotel could spread fast. Luxury depended on trust. One story could cost millions. Victor pressed his fingers together and leaned back in his chair. He thought of Elena Cruz standing in the locker room silent. No tears, no raised voice, no pleading, just stillness. That bothered him more than panic would have. Most employees reacted the same way when accused. They explained. They cried. They denied loudly. Their fear showed. It made decisions easy. You could label them unreliable, emotional, unprofessional. Elena had not done that. Victor didn't like uncertainty. He tapped the desk once sharply and called his assistant. "Schedule a meeting with legal," he said when she answered. Quietly. "Yes, Mr. Hale." He ended the call and stood up again, pacing slowly. His shoes made soft sounds on the carpet. Everything in this room was chosen carefully. The silence, the colors, the view. Control mattered to him. It always had. Victor had grown up poor. No one knew that. He made sure of it. His father drank too much and talked too little. His mother cleaned houses. Victor remembered the smell of bleach on her hands the way she came home tired and silent. He remembered promising himself he would never live like that. Never depend on anyone's mercy. Power was safety. Reputation was armor. When he was young, he learned that people believed confidence more than truth. If you spoke first and spoke firmly, others followed. That lesson had carried him far. Now a single cleaner threatened that balance. Not with words, with her silence. Victor stopped pacing and stared at the tablet again. The hallway camera footage had been reviewed. It showed Elena entering the suite. It showed her leaving. No bracelet, no clear evidence. That should have ended it, but the guest was persistent, influential. She had already mentioned posting a review. She had connections. Victor exhaled slowly. In business, perception mattered more than facts. If the guest felt wronged, the hotel was wrong. Someone had to take responsibility, and it could not be him. His phone buzzed. A message from Martin. "Staff are asking questions. The cleaner hasn't said anything." Victor's jaw tightened. He typed back quickly. "Keep staff focused. Limit discussion." He locked the tablet and placed it on the desk. There were two ways to handle this. Investigate fully, risk delay, risk attention, or act decisively. Remove the problem before it grew. Victor preferred decisive action. Downstairs, Elena stood in the service corridor, holding the sealed envelope Martin had given her. She hadn't opened it yet. She didn't need to. She knew what it meant. Victor did not see that moment. He was already thinking ahead. He imagined the headlines if the bracelet story leaked. Luxury hotel faces theft allegations. He imagined investors calling voices tight with concern. He imagined the board asking hard questions, all because of one employee. He called his lawyer Daniel Price, a man who wore confidence like a second skin. "Daniel," Victor said, "I need advice on a personnel matter." Daniel's voice was smooth. "Of course." "What's the situation?" Victor explained briefly. He chose his words carefully. He did not accuse Elena directly. He didn't need to. Daniel listened, then said, "From a risk perspective, you should terminate immediately. Document it as a breach of trust. That protects the brand." Victor nodded, even though Daniel couldn't see him. "What about backlash?" Victor asked. Daniel chuckled softly. "From whom? She's a cleaner. These things don't go anywhere unless you let them." Victor ended the call and sat down again. His decision settled into place, firm and cold. He remembered his mother once standing in a stranger's kitchen, her eyes down, her voice quiet. He pushed the memory away. Sentiment was a weakness he could not afford. Downstairs, Martin finally opened the envelope for Elena. Inside was a termination notice, effective immediately. Reason: violation of company policy pending investigation. Elena read it slowly. Her hands did not shake. "Mr. Hale wants you out of the building within the hour," Martin said, not meeting her eyes. "Security will escort you." Rosa stood nearby, frozen. Other cleaners whispered. Elena folded the paper carefully and placed it back in the envelope. "I need my last paycheck," she said quietly. Martin nodded stiffly. "It will be mailed." Elena looked around the corridor. The walls were bare. The floor was scuffed. This place had been part of her life for 7 years. And now it was closing its doors to her without a word of explanation. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. And that more than anything made people uncomfortable. Victor Hale watched the security feed from his office as Elena walked out with her bag. She moved slowly, her back straight, her head high. No drama, no scene. Victor felt a flicker of irritation. "She thinks silence makes her look strong," he muttered to himself. He didn't realize yet that silence was not her weakness. It was her choice, and it was already beginning to work. Security escorted Elena through the service exit, not the front doors. The hallway was narrow, lit by buzzing fluorescent lights. 2 guards walked on either side of her, careful not to touch her as if contact itself might cause trouble. Elena held her bag close to her body. Inside were the same few things she brought every day. Nothing more, nothing less. When they reached the exit, one guard cleared his throat. "You can go." Elena nodded once. She stepped outside into the cold afternoon air. The door closed behind her with a soft click. No one said goodbye. The city moved on as if nothing had happened. Elena stood there for a moment, unsure where to go. She had planned her life around shifts and bus routes. Now time stretched in front of her, empty and frightening. She adjusted the strap of her bag and began to walk. By the time she reached the bus stop, her phone buzzed. A message from Rosa. "I'm so sorry. This isn't right." Elena read it, then locked her phone. She did not reply. She did not know what to say. Comfort felt heavy in her hands, like something she might drop. At home, the apartment was quiet. Matteo was still at school. Elena placed her bag on the chair and sat at the small kitchen table. She stared at the wall, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. She thought about rent, about groceries, about school fees, about the letter still folded in her bag. She did not cry. That evening, a knock came at the door. Elena opened it to find a woman in a neat gray suit holding a clipboard. "Ms. Elena Cruz," the woman asked. "Yes. I'm from the Aurora Crown Legal Department," the woman said. "We're here to inform you that an investigation is ongoing regarding a missing item. You are advised not to discuss this matter publicly." Elena listened. Her face remained calm. "You may be contacted again," the woman continued. "If you have any information, you should report it." Elena nodded. "Do you understand?" the woman asked. "Yes," Elena said. The woman seemed surprised by the lack of questions. She hesitated, then handed Elena a card. "You should consider legal representation." Elena took the card. The woman left. When Matteo came home, Elena cooked dinner like always. Rice, beans, a small piece of chicken she had saved. Matteo talked about school, about a test, about a friend. Elena listened. "Mom," Matteo said finally. "Why were you home early?" Elena paused, then answered, "I lost my job." Matteo froze. "Why? They said I did something I didn't do." Matteo's eyes filled with anger. "That's not fair." Elena reached across the table and held his hand. "I will handle it." "How?" he asked. Elena looked at him, quietly. The next morning, Victor Hale stood in front of a group of managers in the conference room. He spoke calmly. "There has been an internal issue," he said. "It has been resolved. Our priority is the reputation of the Aurora Crown." One manager raised a hand. "What about the cleaner people are talking?" Victor's smile was thin. "People always talk. We don't." The guest with the missing bracelet had already been compensated. A full refund. A free future stay. She left satisfied. Victor felt confident again. 2 days later, Elena received a formal letter. It accused her of theft. It demanded cooperation. It warned of potential legal consequences. She read it slowly. She folded it and placed it beside the termination notice. Then she did something unexpected. She went to a legal aid office. The waiting room was small and crowded. Elena sat quietly until her name was called. A young lawyer named Miriam greeted her with kind eyes. "Tell me what happened," Miriam said. Elena took a breath. She spoke slowly. She chose her words carefully. She did not exaggerate. She did not plead. Miriam listened without interrupting. When Elena finished, Miriam leaned back. "They fired you without evidence, and now they're accusing you formally. That's serious." Elena nodded. "I know." "Do you want to fight this?" Miriam asked. Elena thought of the locker room, of the eyes on her, of Victor Hale's cold voice. "Yes," she said. "Then we file a wrongful termination claim," Miriam said, "and we challenge the accusation." Elena nodded again. Legal papers were filed quietly. Notices were sent. Victor Hale received them a week later. He read them in his office, his expression darkening. "Wrongful termination," he said aloud. "She's suing Daniel Price," laughed lightly over the phone. "It's a bluff. These cases rarely go far." Victor frowned. "Make it go away." "We can offer a settlement," Daniel said. "Small amount. Confidential." Victor agreed. Elena received the offer. It was more money than she had ever held at once. It would solve her problems. It would end the stress. Miriam explained it carefully. "If you accept, the case ends. No trial, no public record." Elena listened. She looked at the paper. "Do they admit fault?" she asked. "No," Miriam said. "They deny everything." Elena folded the paper. "Then I won't accept." Miriam studied her. "This will be hard. They have money, influence." Elena met her eyes. "I know." The case moved forward. News of the lawsuit leaked, not from Elena, from someone inside the hotel. A small article appeared online. "Former cleaner accuses luxury hotel of wrongful termination." Victor saw it during breakfast. His coffee went cold. "This is becoming a problem," he said sharply to Daniel. Daniel's tone changed. "If she pushes this to trial, things could surface. Internal practices, camera footage, witnesses." Victor stared at the screen. "She hasn't said anything publicly." "That might be the most dangerous part," Daniel said quietly. Victor felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Unease. Elena prepared for the trial in silence. She attended meetings. She signed papers. She answered questions only when necessary. When reporters tried to contact her, she declined. When neighbors whispered, she kept walking. When fear crept in at night, she sat at the table and folded her hands just like she had done before. The court date was set, and for the first time, Victor Hale realized that the woman he had dismissed so easily was not backing down. She was waiting, and soon her silence would have a room full of people listening to it. After the court date was announced, Elena's days became quieter, but heavier. The noise of the hotel was gone. No rolling carts, no elevators chiming, no voices calling her name only when something was wrong. Now there was just the apartment, the bus outside, and the long hours of waiting. Money became a careful calculation. Elena wrote numbers on the back of old envelopes. Rent, food, bus fare, school supplies. She crossed out anything that was not essential. Meat became rare. Fresh fruit was counted one by one. She learned how long a bag of rice could last if she cooked it slowly. Matteo noticed. "Mom, I can get a job after school," he said one evening. Elena looked at him sharply. "No, I'm old enough." "You need to study," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "That is your job." Matteo wanted to argue, but he didn't. He saw the tiredness in her eyes. He saw how she rubbed her hands at night, even though they no longer touched bleach. At school, rumors reached him anyway. Someone's mother worked near the Aurora Crown. Someone had read something online. "Your mom stole jewelry," a boy said one afternoon, loud enough for others to hear. Matteo didn't hit him. He wanted to. Instead, he walked home with his fists clenched, his jaw tight. That night he told Elena. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she reached for his hand. People talk, she said quietly. Talking is easy. But it's not true, Matteo said. I know, Elena replied. Then why don't you tell them he asked? Why don't you explain? Elena looked at the wall for a moment. Then she said, because sometimes explaining gives power to lies. Matteo didn't fully understand, but he nodded. Letters arrived from the court, from lawyers, from offices Elena had never entered before. Miriam walked her through each one patient and clear. They are building a narrative, Miriam said during one meeting. They will try to make you look careless, or dishonest, or angry. Elena sat with her hands folded. I am none of those things, I know, Miriam said. But court is not about what you know. It's about what others believe. Elena nodded. Depositions began. Witness statements were requested. Elena answered questions in a small room with a recorder on the table. Did you enter suite 1803 on the day in question? A lawyer asked. Yes. Did you touch the guest's belongings? No. Did you take the bracelet? No. That was all. The lawyer leaned forward. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Elena paused. Her heart beat slowly. No. The lawyer frowned slightly, then ended the session. Outside, Miriam exhaled. You could say more, you know. Elena shook her head. I said what matters. As the weeks passed, pressure grew. Friends from work stopped calling. Some were afraid. Some believed the rumors. Some didn't want trouble. Rosa visited once, bringing bread and canned soup. They're saying you were difficult, Rosa whispered. That you had problems before. Elena smiled faintly. I clean floors. How difficult could I be? Rosa laughed, then grew serious. I believe you. Elena touched her arm. That's enough. At the Aurora Crown, Victor Hale prepared for the trial like a business negotiation. He met with lawyers, reviewed statements, and practiced calm responses. She refuses to talk, Daniel said during one meeting. No interviews, no public defense. Victor frowned. That makes her look mysterious. Victim-like. We'll counter that, Daniel said. We'll show inconsistencies. Other cleaners will testify. Victor nodded. Do whatever it takes. Behind his calm, a tension built. He slept less. He snapped at staff. Every article, no matter how small, felt like a threat. Silent cleaner takes luxury hotel to court. The headline annoyed him more than accusations ever could. Why silence? Why not cry? Why not beg? He couldn't control that. As the trial approached, Elena received one last settlement offer. Larger this time. Urgent. Miriam laid it out on the table. This is significant. It would cover your losses and more. Elena read the paper slowly. She imagined rent paid. Matteo relaxed. The case gone. Do they apologize? She asked. No, Miriam said. Do they clear my name? No. Elena folded the paper and slid it back. Then it doesn't help. Miriam searched her face. You know this could break you. Elena met her gaze. It already tried. The night before the trial, Elena could not sleep. She sat at the kitchen table again, hands folded, listening to the city outside. Matteo came out of his room. Are you scared? He asked. Elena looked at him. Yes. He sat across from her. Will you talk tomorrow? Elena thought carefully. Only if I must. Matteo nodded. I'll be there. In the morning, the courthouse steps were crowded. Cameras, reporters, strangers. Elena walked past them without a word. Inside the courtroom was cool and quiet. Wood benches, a high ceiling, the weight of attention. Victor Hale arrived surrounded by lawyers confident and polished. When Elena took her seat at the opposite table, she felt every eye turn toward her. She lowered her gaze. She straightened her back. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The trial was about to begin. And for the first time, Elena understood that her silence was no longer just hers. It belonged to the room. The courtroom settled into a heavy stillness after the judge took his seat. The sound of shuffling papers echoed, then faded. Elena sat upright beside Miriam, her hands resting calmly on the table. She wore a simple dark jacket, clean and pressed. Nothing about her drew attention, yet many eyes kept returning to her. Victor Hale sat across the room, flanked by two lawyers. Daniel Price leaned forward, confident, whispering final notes. Victor's posture was relaxed. He looked like a man who belonged there. The judge cleared his throat. "We will begin." Daniel stood first. His voice was smooth, controlled, filling the room easily. "This case is about trust," he began. "A luxury hotel depends on it. Guests trust us with their safety, their privacy, and their valuables. When that trust is broken, action must be taken." He gestured lightly toward Elena, without looking at her directly. The Aurora Crown acted responsibly. An item went missing. An employee was present. An investigation was initiated. Decisions were made to protect the business and its guests. Daniel paused, letting his words sink in. "This is not cruelty. This is accountability." Victor nodded slowly, his expression calm. Miriam rose next. Her voice was quieter but steady. "This case is about power," she said, "and what happens when it is used without care. Ms. Cruz was accused without evidence, dismissed without proof, and publicly humiliated without a voice. Elena remained still. She did not look at the jury. She did not look at Victor. The first witness was the guest from Suite 1803. She took the stand wearing a tailored coat, her posture confident. "I know what I saw," she said. "The bracelet was there before the cleaner arrived. It was gone after." Daniel nodded encouragingly. "Did you see Ms. Cruz take it?" "No," the guest admitted. "But who else could it be?" Miriam stood. "Did you leave the suite at any point?" "Yes. Did anyone else enter the room? I'm not sure." Miriam nodded. "Thank you." The guest stepped down, her certainty less sharp than before. Next came Martin, the manager. He adjusted his tie nervously as he spoke. "We followed protocol," he said. "The accusation was serious. We had to act." "Did you find the bracelet?" Miriam asked. "No." "Did the camera footage show Ms. Cruz taking anything?" "Then on what basis was she terminated?" Martin hesitated. His eyes flicked toward Victor. "Based on the complaint," he said finally. A murmur moved through the courtroom. Other staff members testified. One said Elena was too quiet. Another said she kept to herself. One suggested she seemed resentful. Elena listened without reacting. Her face did not change. Her silence sat between each statement like an unanswered question. When Daniel called Elena to the stand, the room tightened. Elena stood and walked slowly to the witness chair. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore the oath, and sat. Daniel smiled politely. "Miss Cruz, this is your chance to explain yourself." Elena looked at him calmly. "Did you take the bracelet?" Daniel asked. "No." "Would you like to tell the court what really happened?" Elena paused. The silence stretched. People leaned forward. "I already answered," she said softly. Daniel's smile stiffened. "You're refusing to elaborate." "I am telling the truth," Elena replied. "There is nothing more." Whispers spread through the room. Daniel pressed on. "You understand how this looks?" Elena met his eyes for the first time. "Yes." "And you still choose not to explain?" "Yes." The judge watched her closely. Miriam stood. No further questions. Elena stepped down, her legs steady. The trial continued. Arguments were made. Documents were shown. Still something had changed. The courtroom felt different now. Uneasy. Less certain. During a break, Victor leaned toward Daniel. "Why isn't she defending herself?" Daniel frowned. "It's unusual. It's risky," Victor said. Daniel lowered his voice. "Or strategic." When court resumed, the judge requested the security footage be replayed. The grainy video showed Elena entering and leaving the suite. Calm, methodical, no sign of theft. The judge leaned back, his expression unreadable. As the day ended, the room buzzed with tension. Elena returned to her seat, her hands folded again. She had said almost nothing, yet the silence she carried now felt heavier than any argument, and it was pressing on everyone. The second day of the trial began with a tension that did not fade when people took their seats. It settled deeper instead, like weight added slowly, deliberately. Elena sat in the same place wearing the same calm expression. Her silence from the day before had followed everyone home. It lingered in the room even before the judge entered. Victor Hale noticed it the moment he sat down. People were watching him differently now, not with admiration, not with trust, with curiosity, with doubt. Daniel leaned toward him. "We need to close this cleanly today." Victor nodded, though his jaw was tight. The judge entered. Proceedings resumed. Miriam stood. "Your Honor, before we continue, the plaintiff would like to submit additional evidence that came to light last night." Daniel's head snapped up. "Objection." The judge raised a hand. "You'll have a chance to respond. Proceed." Miriam handed documents to the clerk. "This evidence comes from a former employee of the Aurora Crown. They requested anonymity out of fear of retaliation." Victor's chest tightened. The documents were projected onto the screen. Internal emails, timestamps, instructions. One email was highlighted. "If the guest insists, remove the cleaner immediately. We cannot risk a scene." The sender's name appeared at the bottom. Martin Hale, Victor's brother, head of operations. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Daniel stood quickly. "Your Honor, these emails are taken out of context." The judge studied the screen. "We'll decide that after we hear testimony." Miriam nodded. "We request to call Mr. Martin Hale to the stand." Martin froze in his seat. Victor turned to Daniel, his voice low. "You said this was contained." Daniel swallowed. "I didn't know about these emails." Martin took the stand, his face pale. He adjusted the microphone with shaking hands. Miriam approached slowly. "Mr. Hale, did you instruct management to terminate Miss Cruz before the investigation concluded?" Martin hesitated. "We needed to act fast." "To protect the hotel?" Miriam asked. "Yes." "Not to find the truth." Martin looked down. "The guest was important." Miriam nodded. "Did you ever confirm the bracelet was stolen?" "No. Did you ever consider that it might have been misplaced?" Martin's voice cracked. "No." A quiet murmur spread again. Miriam stepped back. No further questions. Daniel rushed forward for cross-examination. "Mr. Hale, were you under pressure from your brother to resolve this quickly?" Martin glanced toward Victor. The room seemed to hold its breath. "Yes," Martin said. Victor stiffened. Daniel's face tightened. "That's all." Martin stepped down, avoiding Victor's eyes. The judge leaned forward. "I have one question," he said calmly. "Was the bracelet ever recovered?" The guest shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her lawyer stood. "Your Honor, the bracelet was found 2 weeks later." A shock ran through the room. "Where?" the judge asked. "In the guest's private vehicle," the lawyer admitted. "Between the seats." Silence fell like a heavy cloth. Elena did not move. Victor's face drained of color. The judge turned slowly toward the defense table. "Why was this not disclosed earlier?" Daniel stood flustered. "We were not informed." The judge's voice was firm. "Ignorance is not an excuse in this court." The guest lowered her head. Miriam spoke softly. "Ms. Cruz never spoke publicly, never accused, never defended herself beyond the truth. She let the facts exist on their own." The judge looked at Elena. She met his eyes briefly, respectfully, without pride. That was all. The judge leaned back, his decision forming clearly now. "I have seen many cases," he said, "few where silence has spoken so loudly." Victor's shoulders sagged slightly. The ruling came swiftly. Wrongful termination, defamation, abuse of power. The Aurora Crown was found liable. Victor Hale was ordered to issue a public apology, reinstate Elena Cruz's record, and pay significant damages. Further review of management practices was mandated. The gavel struck once. It was over. Elena remained seated for a moment, her hands still folded. Miriam touched her arm gently. "You did it," she whispered. Elena stood slowly. She did not smile. She did not cry. Across the room, Victor stayed in his chair, staring ahead. The armor he had worn for years had cracked. People no longer looked at him with admiration. They looked at him with understanding. And understanding, he realized too late, could be far more damaging. As Elena walked toward the exit, reporters surged forward. "Ms. Cruz, how does it feel to win? Why didn't you speak sooner?" Elena stopped. She turned slightly, just enough to be heard. "I trusted the truth," she said quietly. Then she walked on. Her silence had done the rest. The weeks after the trial passed without noise. Elena did not give interviews. She did not appear on talk shows. She did not write posts or statements. She returned to her life the same way she had lived it before, quietly, carefully, with her head held steady. The money from the court arrived in a single transfer. It was more than Elena had ever imagined owning. She sat at the kitchen table when she opened the letter, Mateo beside her. She read the number twice to be sure. Mateo's eyes widened. "Does this mean—" "It means we can breathe," Elena said. They paid the rent first, then the school fees, then the bills that had waited too long. Elena bought groceries without counting every item. She bought Mateo a new backpack because his old one was tearing at the seams. She did not celebrate. Dignity, she felt, did not need celebration. A month later, Elena received another letter. This one was printed on thick paper marked with the Aurora Crown's logo. Inside was the court-ordered apology. The words were formal, careful, correct. "We regret the actions taken against Miss Elena Cruz and acknowledge that she was wrongfully terminated." Elena read it once, then folded it and placed it in a drawer. She did not need to frame it. She did not need to show it to anyone. Her name had been cleared. That was enough. Victor Hale's name appeared in the news again, but this time the tone was different. Articles spoke of management failures and abuse of authority. Investors asked questions. The board demanded changes. Victor stepped down from daily operations within 3 months. He did not lose everything. Men like him rarely did. But something essential was gone. The certainty, the belief that silence only belonged to the powerless. Sometimes late at night, Victor remembered the woman in the witness chair. Her stillness. The way she had looked at the judge without asking for anything. It unsettled him more than anger ever could. Elena found work again, but not in a luxury hotel. She took a job at a small community clinic, cleaning floors and waiting rooms. The pay was modest, but the people looked at her when they spoke. They said her name. They thanked her. On her first day, the supervisor asked, "Do you have any questions?" Elena thought for a moment. "Just one," she said. "Where do you keep the extra gloves?" The supervisor smiled and showed her. Mateo began to change too. He walked taller. He spoke more. When someone at school mentioned the trial, he didn't argue. He simply said, "You don't know my mother." And he was right. One evening, Elena stood at the clinic's entrance, after her shift watching the sun fall between buildings. A young woman approached her nervous. "Ms. Cruz," she asked, "I saw your case online. I'm going through something similar at work." Elena listened. She did not interrupt. When the woman finished, Elena said only one thing: "Tell the truth, then let it stand." The woman nodded, tears in her eyes. As Elena walked home that night, the city felt different. Not kinder, not fairer, just clearer. Silence, she had learned, was not empty. It was a space where truth could breathe if given time. And sometimes the strongest voice in the room was the one that refused to shout. So if you ever wonder what power looks like, don't always listen for it. Sometimes it is sitting quietly at a table, hands folded, waiting, and letting the truth speak for itself.